If you're not already subscribed to this YouTube channel, go ahead and hit the subscribe button now, along with the bell icon so you can be notified whenever a new video is posted. And if you're already subscribed, check and make sure that YouTube hasn't unsubscribed you. And of course, be sure to give the video a like as well as share it on your social media. The white supremacists hate that. And now, the Sunday address.
Given the just stratospheric entrance of Vice President Kamala Harris into the presidential campaign, and she has now secured enough delegates to become the nominee, you're going to look real crazy being on the other side of that line, particularly as a person of color. But really as anyone who claims to have any connection to the culture. You're going to look real weird and real lonely on that side. The door needs to close behind Amber. And she looked crazy over there. But shut the door behind her. You really are going to look crazy being on that side, given the cultural phenomenon of Vice President Kamala Devi Harris.
Many months later.
Well, that didn't age very well, now did it? Turns out Joy Reid's the only one who wound up looking real weird, but this is how she's talking to black folks in particular. If you don't do what I say, you're gonna look real weird. Yeah, the woman who utterly failed to have her thumb to the pulse of the Black Street. That's because she has nothing to do with the Black Street. Now, we're not going to waste this entire Sunday address talking about the predictable fall of Joy Reid, but we do have to mention it because she was one of the last bootlicks standing, or is it sitting, that the white media had out there, the last holdout still trying to pretend as if, oh, well, you see, it's still hunky-dory, nothing's changed in the white media, they still got some black folks that they let hang around as their house pets, so that basically means we're still all on the team, right? Now, according to the LA Times, Joy Reid had signed a new contract with MSNBC just last year. So just like that, the white media went from telling her, oh, you've still got yourself a job for a few more years, we like having you around, to instantly telling her, okay, now clear out your desk. Gee, what could have possibly changed? And don't let the white media headlines fool you either. This wasn't a shakeup or a reshuffle. It was a crackdown. Just like they did the first time that Trump became president. Reshuffle is one of my favorite words the white media has been using to describe her firing. You know, when you do a reshuffling, that means that positions are changed. Like a deck of cards, you do a reshuffling means you're moving them around. But you don't throw away any cards during a reshuffle. Joy Reid, on the other hand, isn't being reshuffled or even recycled. She's being removed. And why is that? Well, it's because the orange man is back in the White House, so these white media companies are doing exactly what they did 8 years ago the first time he was in there. They're pivoting to accommodate him. Why? Because his FCC is going to be very generous to corporations. And that's who owns MSNBC and the rest of these white media so-called news outlets and these newspapers like the New York Times and the Washington Post owned by Jeff Bezos. So for all of them, it's in their best interest to now get back in the orange man's good graces. That's the reason why Joe Scarborough and Mika the Bigot Brzezinski were the very first ones to go running to Mar-a-Lago with their tails between their legs, bowing and scraping before Trump. They knew that after all the trash talking they had done about him the previous 4 years, they had to go ahead and make sure that they were the first ones in the door saying, oh, Mr. President, may we please lick your boots. And they also knew that the corporate heads over at MSNBC, or rather Comcast, who owns MSNBC, they knew that those guys wanted to make sure that they got in good with Trump as well. So if there was going to be some sort of backlash, they wanted to try to get themselves out of the line of fire. See, that's what Joe Scarborough learned from his years as a Republican politician. And it shouldn't surprise anyone, as Neely Fuller said, white supremacy believes in taking both sides of the conversation. That way, no matter who loses, they always win. Sure, MSNBC renewed Joy Reid's contract when they thought that Trump's poll numbers were bad and that they would need Joy to be their Negro whisperer for a Kamala Harris presidency. And I'm sure that for a good long while, Joy Reid thought that she was safe. But then when the poll numbers began to turn, especially back in the fall, and it became more and more clear that the orange man was going to be able to slither his way back into the White House, they already had her pink slip typed up. Don't kid yourself. They already knew that they were going to be throwing her out the door as soon as the returns came in for election night 2024. That's when they already looked and said, okay, so we're not going to be needing Joy Reid to be around anymore. Good. Nobody liked her anyway. That's what was going on around the offices of Comcast. They already wanted her out, and this was going to be their way to go ahead and expedite a move that they already wanted to make. Everybody could see the writing on the wall, but then again, Joy Reid had absolutely no incentive to admit to this reality. After all, what the hell else is she going to do? Where's she going to go? Far as she's concerned, that renewed contract was ironclad, or at least she needed it to be. Well, at this point, she might as well ask Tiffany Cross if she can get the number to her lawyer. Both of them could probably try to do some sort of joint action to sue MSNBC for some money. Might as well. And you can't even really gloat about it that much because we all saw this one coming for years. This was no surprise to anyone at all. Well, except for Joy Reid. I'm sure that she's absolutely shocked. She can't understand what on earth she did wrong. All those years of feckless butt-kissing that she did for the Democrats and for the white media, she was the one who led the charge to attack the black grassroots on air. The rest of her white media colleagues, the white ones at least, were smart enough to not try to attack us directly, but not Joy Reid or Tiffany Cross for that matter. Remember, it was in 2020 that Joy Reid used her show as a platform to attack us directly, saying that anyone who was talking about reparations was a Russian bot. She was the one who did that. You didn't hear that from the folks over there on Fox News. You didn't hear that from anybody else. You heard that from Joy Reid. And it's no accident that they had a black face out there selling the soap. Same way that Tiffany Cross attacked Brother Tariq by name on her show. That's what they do. They use their platforms to call us out by name. Now, these black tools, that's why they were employed by the white media, to do the white media's dirty work and attack us directly. That way, their good white colleagues didn't have to do it themselves. As far as they're concerned, well, if Joe Scarborough does it, or if Rachel Maddow does it, or if you had some clown like Jake Tapper do it, well, that would kind of legitimize these guys. Let's have some of our black tools do it, and that basically we can stand back while they do that. We can go ahead and we can disavow all of this. Now, they had no problem having racists on their show. Joy Reid didn't have a problem with racists like Chris Rufo, and her colleagues had no problem with people like Richard Spencer. But when it comes to people who actually speak for the black grassroots, all of a sudden, well, we can't have them on the air. We dare not talk to them, talking to us crazy like that. Why? Because as far as they're concerned, we're the enemy. Not the white right, not the conservatives, not the Republicans. Black people who are actually speaking up, demanding changes, we're the enemy. We're the ones that they don't even dare even have us on the air, can't even have us on camera. We're too explosive. Sure, you can go ahead and bring on Chris Rufo and his mountain of lies. But as far as bringing on anyone from the black media to speak the truth, nah, we ain't doing that. We can't do that. So this is the reason why we do not care that Joy Reid got shown the door. Because what she did with her show was to use it as a platform to attack us. Now, instead of bringing black folks on, black folks who are going to be speaking some realness, instead she brought on the Jason Johnsons and bringing on the Shea Butter crowd and a bunch of other safe, non-threatening bootlicks for all the good it did her. Oh, and can you believe that some fool at the LA Times actually had the gall to write, but once Reid leaves, the network may have to deal with the wrath of her fans and the left-leaning followers of MSNBC. What a joke. Fans? Joy Reid doesn't have any fans. In fact, at this point, she barely has any viewers. All she has are the corpulent losers from Shea Butter Twitter, and those morons couldn't help Kamala Harris keep her job either. The wrath of the ski-wee is a myth. Tiffany Cross got crossed out by MSNBC, and her ratings were more respectable than Joy Reid's, that is, considering her time slot. The old black demographic who may still be silly enough to watch MSNBC on a regular basis, they're simply too small in number and too small in their mentality to matter. None of those people are going to be causing any sort of a stink, and even if they did, they're not numerous enough for anyone to actually be scared of them. What do they expect to happen? You're going to get a few angry tweets from Shea Butter Twitter? And what exactly is that supposed to do? Is that supposed to make the white executives over at Comcast start quaking in their boots and go, oh, there's some angry serial tweeters over there on Twitter, and they're sitting here putting us in some sort of chain. They did a couple of retweets. Oh, we better go ahead and put Joy Reid back on the air. Otherwise, they'll be giving us some down votes on our YouTube videos. Is that what's supposed to happen? Are they supposed to be scared of a couple of retweets? Give me a break. But this is supposed to be passing for political and media analyses over at the LA Times. But now that these folks over there at Comcast, their priorities have changed, they're not going back on this. They're throwing her overboard, and this was always going to be the result. When Goldie Taylor got the heave-ho, there was no wrath from anyone. Same for Melissa Perry, and Roly-Poly Martin, and Tiffany Cross, and Don Lemon. These people don't have a following. Because nobody actually respects them. They don't have the respect of black viewers. The only reason that these people were on the air at all was because they were non-threatening Negroes. Not just non-threatening to the general white audience, but most of all, non-threatening to the white media executives who they wanted jobs from. That was the main thing that they were supposed to be doing, presenting themselves as non-threatening to the white powers that be, which they did. And what that means is, if they don't look at you as any sort of a threat, they also will have absolutely no intimidation whatsoever when it comes time to throw you out. They won't even think about it. Why should they? None of these bootlicks are a threat to them in any shape, form, or fashion. That's how they got their jobs, and that's also how they lost their jobs. See, this is what happens when you convince yourself that the cozy sound stages over at MSNBC is what constitutes the pulse of black America. You sit there and tell yourself that a couple of shea butter bootlicks on Twitter, apparently them giving you a couple of likes, that means that you're speaking for the black folks. Well, the black folks who matter. This is what happens when you try to convince yourself of that. Put yourself in a cocoon, a little bubble. Instead of listening to the harsh truth that we represent, they instead decided to sit around and tell each other that they were right. So now Joy Reid is signing off. For the last time. Yes, it is deja vu all over again, because last time we saw this was, well, the last time the Democrats lost the White House. Obama was gone, and the handful of token Negro whisperers that the white media had put on the payroll were being shown the door without so much as a buy your leave. And look at how unapologetic they're being about it. See, this is the reason that the white media over there at MSNBC started giving Michael Steele's uncharismatic raggedy behind more face time. This guy is basically the Uncle Ruckus of the right is what he is. Now, aside from him and Al Sharpton and Jonathan putting on his cape heart, well, that's pretty much all the last bootlick standing. Oh, I'm sorry. There is Simone Mammy Sanders, isn't there? And you can see her cheesing all the time. As far as she's concerned, she's thinking to herself, I'm climbing the ladder. I'm climbing the ladder. But she's going to wind up the same way that they all do. They have no permanent plans for any of these clowns. Assuming that his show hasn't already gotten the axe, Jonathan Capehart most likely is the next one who's going to be finding himself without a show. After all, they got their Negroes properly corralled, and that's what they like. As far as they're concerned, we don't mind saying that there's 2 or 3 Negroes who work here, just so long as we never have to see them more than, say, 30 minutes a day. That's the kind of arithmetic that the white media likes to do, and it's because that's what their audiences want at the end of the day. Now, from time to time, the white media would remind Joy Reid and the public about some of her more controversial weblogs from the past, and that was just to keep Joy Reid properly cowed, which it did. She didn't get out of line. Then again, there wasn't much danger of that. But it should be no surprise to anyone that they canned her regardless. See, bootlicking is a career path that doesn't come with a retirement plan, and there is no amount of professional butt-kissing that you can do for the white media that is going to make them look at you and go, well, maybe we'll go ahead and keep you around. They didn't want these Negroes there to begin with. And no amount of deferring to their white colleagues or respectability politics would be enough to change that. Melissa Harris laced well Perry round the way in 30 days. She got the boot. Never to be heard from again. And you notice that they didn't need to use any controversial social media posts from her past as an excuse to do it either. If they want to throw you out, they're going to do it. Sure, they may try to use something to point to as an excuse or a justification, usually claiming that you offended some white person. Ask Tiffany Cross-Eyes or Don Lemon how that rationale works. But in the end, it always ends the exact same way. When they're sick and tired of looking your black behind, when it becomes expedient to throw you overboard, it doesn't matter if you just got through signing a new contract. As Joy Reid is finding out, they will literally sign a new contract with you, and then about a month later, they'll be handing you a pink slip. That's just the way that works. Well, if you're black, you're supposed to understand that reality. Now, as I said from the outset, we're not going to devote the entire Sunday address talking about Joy Reid getting canceled. You only get excited about something if you're surprised, and we're not surprised at all. We knew that this was how it was going to end no matter what. We've been talking about this all along. She was going to be getting the boot sooner or later, and it happened to be sooner rather than later. She wasn't going to be leaving decades from now after an infamous career of bootlicking. Nah, they weren't going to let her leave the same way they let a Tom Brokaw or whoever that other fool was. They always wanted to make sure that when she would leave, it was going to be suddenly. She was always going to be thrown out the airlock in an instant. There was never any scenario where they were going to let her leave gracefully. And while they didn't send her out the door under a cloud of scandal and disgrace like they did Roly Poly and Don Lemonade, they also didn't let her leave on her own terms either. So what's next for Joy Reid? First of all, nobody cares, but secondly, out of morbid curiosity, I wouldn't be surprised at all if she tries to slither her way over here to the online sphere. As the LA Times just got through intimating, she'll try to convince herself that she's got some sort of online fan base, and she'll try to see if she can trade on that. There's been a number of these little bootlicks and suck-ups who have tried that one. People like the Angela Rise with lettuce and tomatoes on the side, the Bakari sellouts and others. These people all try to reinvent themselves, and it never works out. Though I have to admit that at least in the abstract, I would be somewhat curious about what she attempts to do to try to get her 15 minutes of fame to last for 16 minutes, though just like the rest of you, I wouldn't be interested enough to actually watch. And speaking of things that aren't interesting enough to watch, another white media organization, the NAACP, had their annual circus. And like all circuses, they made sure to have clowns, which is why Kamala Harris was given an award by them. I know what you're thinking. What the heck are they giving her an award for? She didn't win office. What the hell has she done? She lost her presidential campaign for the second time in a row. Talk about a participation trophy, because that's exactly what this is. She's being given a trophy merely for being there, just for having participated in a presidential campaign. You ain't got to win. You don't have to accomplish anything. All you got to do is just run for office, and that's enough for the NAACP to say, you deserve an award. We're not even sure why we're doing it. Just, you deserve an award. Yeah, well, at least she's finally won something. This is what I tell you. Awards under white supremacy are all about bestowing instant legitimacy on something or somebody. And in this case, this is meant to bestow instant black credibility on Kamala Harris. She's now legitimately black because you got this sock puppet organization that claims to speak for black people but hasn't done a doggone thing for black people in decades, and they're vouching for her as being a black recipient. Though they didn't produce a single shred of evidence to back that up. This is apparently what qualifies as evidence, an award. But for what, I don't know, and they don't know either. The only thing they needed was for Joy Reid to be the one to present her the award, and this static portrait of failure would have been complete. All of these irrelevant Negroes who white powers had on the payroll, propping them up for decade on end, and here they are being reduced to the predictable failures that we always said that they were. These are people who are now sitting around trying to tell themselves that they're important because black folks, especially the under 55 crowd, don't pay them any mind. They're irrelevant, they're dinosaurs, and they're now going extinct. But unlike the dinosaurs, there's not going to be any museums for these guys. There won't be any books chronicling their failures either, though there will be some of us making sure to remind you of exactly what kind of treason these people were mired in the hopes that our people will learn not to ever let bootlicks like this insinuate themselves amongst us ever again. And speaking of awards, the white media is still trying to make Cynthia Erivo into a thing, in yet another example of the white media trying to prove that they can pick and choose winners and losers. Cynthia Erivo's been nominated for an Oscar because she played the Wicked Witch of the West. A witch. Well, you can definitely say she was born to play that role. If anybody deserves to have the image of them on a broomstick immortalized for all time, it's Cynthia Erivo, and she knows where she can shove it. I think she might have been nominated before for Harriet. We all know what a fiasco that one became. But good tools are hard to find, so the white media has to at least try to resurrect her career, such as it is. Between Cynthia Erivo and Domingo Coleman, the Academy Awards might as well be called the Massa Won't You Please Let Me Sit Under Your Table Awards. But this is what the bootlicks would inevitably be reduced to, sitting around in a circle, applauding each other, giving one another awards for things that aren't even achievements, literally giving each other awards for nothing. And that being the case, one can only wonder, when the NAACP tries to give Joy Reid a Lifetime Achievement Award for journalism, exactly what are they going to point to?
This isn't even about politics anymore. This is about making a statement about who and what America is. And Joe Biden, to his eternal credit, did that in 2020 when he said,
if you have a problem figuring out whether you're for me or Trump, then you ain't black.
Good evening, and be one. I'd like to take a moment to mention some of our contributors. Charles Reed, Valiza Hollins, Kelly Marie Bax, Jacques Hargett, and Williams. Salute to them and thank you to everyone for listening, liking, and sharing this message. Black empowerment only exists because of you.